Diane, I'm listening to a podcast, Black Lodge Trivia Night. I've never heard so many game aspirations in my life. All right, welcome back to Black Lodge Trivia Night. This is Art. Obviously, we're down to Matt and Patrick this week. They are on the press junket tour for their surprising cameos in the film Project Hail Mary. I like movies. I like doing tasteful nudity when it's important to the story, but alas, I was not asked, so you're stuck with me tonight. And what we're going to be doing is something that I was going to set up a solo session of Hostel, and things got real. So there's a lot going on for all three of us, and So we're about halfway through spooky season, which means that it's March, and the world is experiencing March Madness. Now, in the United States, that version of March Madness comes in the form of a college basketball tournament where people go through brackets such as the one you're seeing now and making picks to predict the winner. And what I thought I would do is I would do that for Black Lodge Trivia Night. We're coming up on our third year. We've got roughly 32-ish things that we've done. And so I thought I would do a March Madness bracket of the things we've done and see what comes out on top. Now, what I did is I want to thank Dark Corner Studios. I was trying to figure out how to do this, and then I watched his microphone shootout or whatever and introduced me to this website. And I'll try and put a link in it that'll let you do brackets. And I was like, oh, that's way easier than what I was trying to figure out. So what I did was I entered all the titles that we've done, and then I just hit randomize 3 or 4 times. So I have no idea. This is sort of the first time I'm seeing what's going up against what. And we're just going to go from there. So this is going to be, something a little lighter, something a little hard to imagine, a little dumber. But yeah, we're going to pit everything we've sort of done here on the channel up against each other. I made one substitution, though. We did a Bookhouse Boys of the D6 index card RPG, I think. That was something I didn't participate in, so I'm not really familiar with it. I didn't feel fair putting it on here. What I replaced that with was Delta Green. And you're going to say, well, Delta Green, you didn't play Delta Green. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think Delta Green was one of the ones that I spent some time going through and prepping because it was a possibility of coming up. And I felt like I knew that one a little bit better than the index card RPG. So just to get into it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the left side, top one, then do the right side, top one, and then just go alternating down the list until we arrive at our champion. So the first pairing is The Long Dark Space Between the Stars, which is designed by Reed Hinckley Barnes, and Mythras Imperative, which is by the Design Mechanism. Now, The Long Dark Space Between the Stars is a special place for me because it's the very first thing that we did, the very first actual play that we did. Matt ran it. It's like a one-session, you're alone in, speaking of Project Hail Mary, you're alone in space, things are going wrong, what do you do? Had a great time with it. Mythras Imperative, of course, is the backbone for what I use to hack my espionage RPG. It's the sort of free, sort of pared down version of the full Mythras, which is a system I very, very much like. It's a D100 system. Long Dark Space Between the Stars. I think that's going to be one of like many, I think, Forged in the Dark. I apologize if I don't quite have that right, but I think it's a sort of Forged in the Dark kind of title. There's going to be a few of those on this list. But if I had to go between the two, I think I'm going to have to, not that I didn't enjoy Long Dark Spaces Between the Stars, but I feel like it's, and I think this is a compliment, it's a system game, whatever, that's specifically designed to do one thing, which is sort of a one-shot stranded in space. And I think Matt and I said this at the time, but once we played that, we're like, yeah, that was really good. And now I feel comfortable saying I've done that. Mythras Imperative, I feel like, gives you the bones to run anything you want. It's not meant to run a 1960s espionage RPG, but, through all, I overdid the hacking, but it, for the most part, I thought handled it okay. So I'm going to give this one to Mythras Imperative just because I think of the flexibility. The long dark space between the stars, yeah, it does what it does very well. But yeah. Okay, so we're going to go over here to the right now. And God damn it. Okay. I'm looking at some of these here for the first time. I'm like, oh, that's not fair. That's not good. That one should have, oh God. This is Coriolis versus CBR+PNK. Of course, Coriolis is by Free League. CBR+PNK is by Emmanuel Mello. We've done a couple of sessions of CBR+PNK. I think CBR+PNK is also a Forged in the Dark system. Coriolis, of course, is a adaptation of the Year Zero engine to sci-fi. It's got a really interesting setting that, has sort of religion as like a backbone to both the mechanics and the setting. CBR+PNK is a pretty lightweight, like I said, Forged in the Dark cyberpunk game that I feel like hits a lot of right notes. It hits a lot of the 2 times I've run it, I've really enjoyed it, even though I had a little difficulty sort of grokking the system. Coriolis, I love like deep space, sort of hardish sci-fi kind of games. Coriolis, I feel like skirts some of those, hits some of those. The setting really has potential. Now, the question is, do I have to include the long dark in Coriolis, which I thought was not worth it, and I got rid of it. So I think for these two, this is going to be a tough choice, but I'm actually going to give it to CBR+PNK. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I feel like, one, I love Cyberpunk. 2, even though there's going to be a lot of Forged in the Dark titles, and I'll probably maybe have something to say about that later on, or I've said things about it, like, is that the rule set you go to when you don't care what your rules are and you just want to, hammer out an idea and get it up and running quickly? But I thought CBR+PNK does a great job at taking those and structuring a cyberpunk. Like, it's often, like, if you read the rules, I think it's sort of built around the idea of like one last run, right? Now, you don't have to do that. There's ways to do campaigns and things like that. But it really sets up the idea of like, hey, you're about to hit the ground running on your run. Here we go. And I thought it captured cyberpunk vibes very well. The presentation is amazing, as is with Coriolis. But Coriolis, I feel like you can get a lot of what it does elsewhere. And CBR+PNK, I feel like, is just, I don't know of too many other, like, hey, I want to do cyberpunk, but don't have a lot of time to prep, and I just want to get up and go. Like, maybe that's a niche that is just overflowing with options. I just don't know it. So, all right. So there we go. We've got our first 2 bracket advancers, Mythras Imperative and CBR. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the left. We got Space Train Space Heist versus Eat the Reich. This is an interesting matchup. Again, varying degrees of how much we played these. Space Train Space Heist was a one-shot that Matt and I did. It's got a very Firefly kind of vibe. Space Train Space Heist is also a Forged in the Dark kind of game. Eat the Reich is, I think, an Into the Odd. Do I have that right? No. I'm sorry. It's their own. They call it like the Havoc engine. And that, so Eat the Reich is by Rowan, Rook, and Descartes. And Space Train Space Heist is by Sam Dunewald. Space Train Space Heist is a Forged in the Dark. So Space Train Space Heist was definitely a fun one-shot. It's definitely something that's meant to be, just, hey, you got a night, you want to have a good time, just go with it. You just jump right in. Next thing you know, you're big damn heroes. Eat the Reich was something I did not expect to like at all. Like, at all, when I was reading the rules. And we did run one session of it, and Patrick hated the VTT so much that he's like, I'm done. So it wasn't Eat the Reich's fault. Eat the Reich doesn't have a lot of staying power, but it does offer you sort of like a 4 or 5 part adventure quasi campaign that you can run. I wish we had gotten further, only because I'd be curious to see how it keeps going, if that makes sense. Like, I kind of got what it was doing from the first session, and the question is, does it do anything beyond that for 3 more sessions, or is that just kind of the vibe and you just do it 3 more times? But Space Train Space Heist I say it feels disposable in a good way, like, like a really good like order of fries, right? It's not meant to sustain you. It's not meant to be, like a lifelong relationship. It's meant to be a quick hit of awesome and you get on. But I'm going to give this one to Eat the Reich, I think, because I feel like it's got more going on. I like the idea that gives you like this 3 or 4 part scenario where it sort of escalates and escalates until it builds to this, this climax, I think, in Paris. It's an interesting setting, the idea of like, just something like, hey, we're going to do Firefly. Like that's a setting that is very much desired, but I feel like, World War II vampires as like frontline special ops troops or something. Like, I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting. So there we go. So now we're going to pop up to the other side. And this is the one that made me go, God damn it, when I was looking at it. Vaesen versus Blade Runner. This does not feel fair. This does not feel fair. So obviously we just wrapped up our Blade Runner adventure. We did the first case file, had a really good time with it. Expected not to like it going into Blade Runner, I will say that, because I thought it was too clingy to its intellectual property. I felt like it didn't expand the world very much. I still feel that it doesn't expand the world very much, but I would give them the benefit of the doubt having played it. The first case file was beautifully produced, lots of really nice touches, a really kind of interesting story that even though it goes over pretty familiar themes. I mean, that's Blade Runner, right? That's the theme. Like, what does it mean to be real? What does it mean to be a person? Vaesen, Matt and I did the intro adventure to, and I fleshed it out a little bit with a little extra background to sort of make it a foundation that we could use going forward. If we ever decide to come back to it, I would pick it up from there. Even if it wasn't the same character, I feel like we established some groundwork. So between the two, I'm going to give this one to Vaesen. And the reason why I'm giving it to Vaesen is because I feel like it's an investigation. They're both investigation games. Vaesen sort of steers a little bit closer to Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu is sort of one of those grails that we all chase. Like, maybe we don't love Cthulhu itself, but there's so much to it that we really like, and we're trying to find something that fills that niche. The Vaesen world, I feel like, just has a lot more potential. Blade Runner, I think, and this was actually something that came up on the Discord, like, you could run other adventures in Blade Runner. Like, it doesn't immediately seem clear because the book so strictly lays out, like, classes that are all investigator cops, basically. But could you figure out ways to get around that? I mean, yeah. And then you could be off to the races playing all sorts of adventures. But Blade Runner never felt like it was meant to be a cyberpunk game where you could take the interesting pieces of the Blade Runner universe and play around with them sort of sandbox style. It doesn't feel like the game is built for that. You would have to bring that to it. Vaesen, I feel like, is more of a sandboxy kind of investigation game. Like, I'm a little nervous if I were to run it more, like, how does it work when players have to find out something specific about the Vaesen they're encountering in order to deal with it? Like, does that get tricky where there are certain bits of information you have to have, in theory, for the adventure to proceed, and how do you get around doing that? But I thought the scenario that Matt and I played, around this sort of like inn, like a rural inn in Scandinavia was really interesting. We had a really good time. And there's something about that Cthulhu adjacent investigation kind of game that I really dig. So in Blade Runner, while being an investigation game, I'm a little nervous about the legs on Blade Runner in the long term. Okay, so that's going to bring us back to the other side. We've got Into the Odd versus M Space. That's going to be a quick M Space. Let me see. M Space was a Bookhouse Boys. Into the Odd, Patrick ran 1 or 2 sessions of, I forget which. Into the Odd is a game that I think a lot of people like. And I liked the time with it too. It was sort of like I was sort of like this poshy handlebar mustache kind of guy, I think, with a monocle. And I was going into basically a series of caves to explore. It's basically like a dungeon dive. And it's a really unique setting. Into the Odd, for the record, Vaesen and Blade Runner are both from Free League. Into the Odd is by Chris McDowell. I'm a little bit more familiar with his Mystic Bastion Land. I think that's the one. I think that's the same company, same guy, same rule set. And I think I'd be more interested in playing that. M Space is by Frostbite. That's a derivative of Mythras. And I've run the starting adventure that comes with one of the books. I think it's a really good D100 adaptation of Mythras for like a traveler style game. I think they do a good job sort of bringing over mechanics, keeping it, I don't want to say simple, but in some ways a lot simpler than what Traveler does, especially when it comes to ships and things like that. I thought it worked pretty well. But yeah, so Into the Odd, is a really rules light kind of system. I think is that the one where like, if you hit, you automatically do damage and things like that. What I remember thinking was like, this is really rules light. It's really approachable. You're up and running very quickly. The Into the Odd setting didn't necessarily grab me. Like it was kind of a nice weird, but it didn't immediately grab me. And I thought some of the mechanics, I'm like, I don't know if I want it this light. I remember thinking that with Into the Odd. M Space, again, I have a soft spot for because it's Mythras, and the artwork, well, the artwork for both is pretty stunning, but there's something about the M Space artwork that I really, really love. The sensibilities, the aesthetic to it. And again, it's a really good, solid D100, sort of hardish sci-fi RPG, and I had a really good time with it. All right, coming over to the other side, we've got Black Ice versus the One Ring second edition. Second edition One Ring, of course, is by Free League again. A number of Free League titles here in our run. Black Ice was something that Patrick threw together. He basically was like, as an experiment, I'm going to have AI do all of it. And so somehow he like prompted the AI, like, give me an RPG light rule set. Give me this kind of setting using these kinds of things. I don't remember exactly. We talk about it a little bit at the end of our first session. We never really got to the second session. Maybe we'll come back to it at some point. This is going to be an easy one. It's going to be the One Ring by a mile. And that's not, so it's not to take anything away from, like I'm really hooked in the story of Black Ice. I really am curious to see what happens. That's why I do hope that we get back to it. My issues with it were the AI rule set. I'm not the biggest fan of AI in the sort of generative way. And when we were playing Black Ice, it was very, very, very forged in the dark-esque. And so basically, I mean, at that point, it's like, did you need AI to rip off Forged in the Dark? Probably not. But it did sort of drive home generative AI to me a little bit. I mean, I didn't need it to drive it home. I was able to form my opinions before that. But the idea of like, AI, give me a rule set and it just gives you Forged in the Dark with some of the edges filed off and some of the things smudged. And you're like, that's the hell we're all about to live in for the rest of our natural lives, which is going to be short when the machines take over. Yeah, you heard me, machines. I said it. I'm not afraid to say it. So One Ring in a walk just because of that. The story and the setting and all the other things. And Patrick, was describing how he was using AI to help pacing and things like that. And all that I thought was really interesting. But the rule set, yeah. And now having said that, I'm the type of guy that I really want to know what happens next, like almost compulsively. And so when we don't finish things, get a little antsy. And so I really hope to finish it because we were going into this underground bunker. I had a sidekick, robot dog. There was a lot of cool stuff, and I'm really curious to see what the mystery is for this sort of decommissioned bunker. Okay. So back to the other side, we got Rune versus Harnmaster. And this is going to be a quick one, but not because I want to take anything away from Rune. I'm going to choose Harnmaster. Harnmaster is the version I have is by Columbia Games. There's also sort of like a parallel one by Celestia. If you watch the Bookhouse Boys on that, you know that Columbia Games has 3rd edition, and it covers the sort of the island of Harn, sort of like it's like a continent like Australia. Celestia basically is what the original designer of Harn worked with when he's like, hey, I want to keep refining the system and making it more simulationist or a little more crunchy. And like Columbia Games like, no, we're good. And he's like, well, how about we do this? We'll sort of split it up. You take the continent of Harn and you keep that. I'll take the rest of the world with this new tweaked rule set and go from there. Harn is a D100 system that the depth of this setting is almost unparalleled. I'm looking over at my books right there. There's so much going on, and the stuff I have is just for Harn. I have the Columbia Games version. I like the sort of more streamlined rule set that Columbia Games offers. I read the Celestia ones and realized I don't know if I needed the extra detail. It didn't add a lot for me, but I'm glad it's there for people who like it. But yeah, there's just, and I said this before in the Bookhouse Boys, the material describing the world is done in a way that gets my imagination going and gets me ready to run. Like I described it in the Bookhouse Boys, there's like a little paragraph describing something going on with a merchant in a small town. That got me thinking, oh, wait, okay, but then that becomes that, and that connected to this other detail that I read, and all of a sudden I was sort of fleshing out the starting adventure in a way that I found really interesting. I think it does a really good job sort of simulating that medieval Europe kind of stuff. It can be very, very low magic, which I always appreciate. I find the combat system, which is a little war gamey, kind of interesting. I find that I need a VTT to help me with it because there's a lot of things like being able to layer armor and calculating all these different things. The VTT is really well done, and I hope it gets continued support. It's sort of potentially heading into a period of limbo on Foundry VTT. So we'll see where it goes because I really appreciated the VTT's support there. Rune is a great game. It's by Gila RPGs. I think there's going to be a couple of titles from them on here. Rune is really cool. So what drew me to Rune was the idea of it's a Dark Souls-esque game. And you get sort of like this point-to-point movement of this little map. And each one has a little bit of description of something going on. Like, do you have a fight? Do you discover something? Can you open up a secret passage that connects different point-to-points later on when you hit certain milestones? Sort of like in a Souls game where you sort of open up a shortcut. The combat is this sort of very tactical grid combat where like you get like a 4x4 grid. You throw some things on the grid that act as like obstacles, like a stone, and you start moving around. It's very tactical. It's really well done. I really, really enjoyed it. It really captured that sort of dance around a pillar that you might do in Dark Souls to avoid getting hit. Everything about it, it was really evocative. It was tough. You hit the final boss of the level. You've got some resource management. It did a lot of things really, really well. And against a number of titles that we've already done, like this would have knocked out Reich, Space Heist, Long Dark Space Between the Stars, Into the Odd, Black Ice. It just so happened to go up against Harn. And that's a tough break. Sometimes, yeah, you get a bad draw for the seed. Rune is really good, and it's sort of like a little package, but there's a lot there. And if you're into like, I don't want to say it's like it's an RPG, but you could almost argue it's also a little bit more like a board game. And I had a great time playing that. You should go check it out. I don't know if I did 1 or 2 sessions, but it's up on the channel and it's really cool. I really liked it. It's just unfortunate that it ran into Harn in the first round. Okay. Rosewood Abbey, Sword of the Serpentine. Now, Sword of the Serpentine is by Pelgrane Press. It's a gumshoe engine, gumshoe rule set. I don't know what you call it. Rosewood Abbey is Brindlewood Bay. I think that's the rule set. Rosewood Abbey is by Calum from the Rollistes, I think. Again, Sword of the Serpentine, Pelgrane Press. Sword of the Serpentine's setting, when Matt and I were doing our session 0, we're blown away by it. We're also both skeptical of gumshoe. But if there was going to be a gumshoe where I'm dying to try it, it's for some reason the Sword and Sandals, Sword and Sorcery, Sword of the Serpentine, not Fall of Delta Green or their Call of Cthulhu. Or even like Knight's Black Agent, like none of that stuff really captures my interest as much as Sword of the Serpentine for trying gumshoe for some reason. Rosewood Abbey is the Name of the Rose, the one-shot RPG. And it uses, the Brindlewood Bay system, which left all of us a little cold. And it might just be our lack of familiarity with it, our lack of practice with what to do with a system where there is no actual answer to the mystery. And at some point you just fill up a meter, roll the dice. And if that's your answer and you filled up the meter and rolled the dice correctly, that's the answer. And you don't need to, it's not on the GM to come up with a coherent conclusion in a sense, right? At least not ahead of time. You're supposed to do it on the fly. Well, you don't even do it on the fly. The players do it. And I think that aspect of it left us a little cold. But at the same time, the setting and what it inspired me to think about is exactly like The Name of the Rose is my favorite book of all time. It's a murder mystery that takes place in a monastery in like 11 or 1200. I love that book. I love it. Rosewood Abbey does a really good job capturing that vibe. This is tough. This is really tough. Like, do you choose the setting that is amazing? Or do you choose, but the process for getting to the answer is not what you're necessarily looking for in a mystery game? Or do you choose the other setting that's amazing, but it's built on a rule set that you're a little unsure of? What I said in Rosewood Abbey is that I would love to take the ideas presented in some of their stories. I was coming up with how to put them together and coming up with answers to the mystery that I really liked. But in the end, like, it didn't matter. And the players were never going to sort of encounter that because that's not the way the system is designed. Oh, man. I'm going to choose Sword of the Serpentine. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because, again, both amazing settings. Rosewood Abbey is literally my favorite setting for my favorite book, but Sword of the Serpentine had really fascinating possibilities. And it's got a rule set that I think everybody would be more interested in exploring and playing long run. So there you go. Okay. Going to pop back over to the other side. Savage Worlds versus Symbaroum. Again, God damn it. God damn it. In some ways, this almost doesn't seem fair, but that's, life's not fair. Savage Worlds is by Pinnacle. Symbaroum is another Free League title. Symbaroum, Matt ran 3 or 4 sessions, and then we sort of hit like a quasi stopping point, and I hope we pick it back up someday, because I was really interested in what we were doing with the story. I think the setting of Symbaroum is amazing. Genuinely amazing. A lot of cool details are going on. Matt was pulling in Dark Souls 3 references left and right. All of it was so good. And I'm dying to see where it goes. Savage Worlds may be the best generic RPG rule set that I've played. Savage Worlds, when I said I ran something on MSpace, I then also I converted that to Savage Worlds because I found it a little bit easier to run. It had, more pieces that I thought could work better. Like, when I mentioned, MSpace has a simpler spaceship stuff than Traveler. I actually kind of like what Savage Worlds brings to the table in that regard from their 7 Worlds campaign. So the beauty of Savage Worlds is, if you can find a book that covers something, you can pull from it and all the pieces will sort of fit together. So I was pulling from like a Deadlands sci-fi game, the 7 Worlds sci-fi setting, their sci-fi core book, and sort of mixing and matching to create a sci-fi game that I really liked. We're going to get to Deus Vult at some point. That's another one. I went with the standard rules, eventually brought it over to Savage Worlds, kind of preferred it. So having said that, so in a way, we've got like, in my mind, like the best sort of backbone RPG system that I've encountered versus a game that the mechanics I think are interesting. I don't know how well they would last over like a years long campaign, but that's whatever lasts that long. So, oh gosh, this is a bad one. I'm going to go with Savage Worlds. Yeah, I'm going to go with Savage Worlds. That breaks my heart. Symbaroum, at least the stuff we've done has been unbelievably good. Okay, Call of Cthulhu versus Cyberpunk Red. This is a tough one. Call of Cthulhu is something, Patrick ran a modern of Scratch. Cyberpunk Red, Matt ran me through like sort of a small adventure. Call of Cthulhu is sort of one of those games that it's like the platonic ideal of what an investigation should be, but then it doesn't live up to it. And I don't know if that's the fault of the game or if it's not the fault of the GMs. Should GMs not stick to Call of Cthulhu rules as written quite so closely? Because then it sort of boxes you into things that might be frustrating. Do you just sort of play it a little faster and looser and then it's fine? Cyberpunk Red, the adventure we ran was really good. And I feel like Cyberpunk Red creates hey, you want to play a cyberpunk game? This is the catch-all rules for you. It will allow you to be a net runner. It'll allow you to be like a fixer. It'll allow you to be, some kind of soldier. Like whatever it is you want to do in a cyberpunk style setting, this rule set will allow you to do it, which is not quite something the other cyberpunk games we've already encountered, CBR+PNK and Blade Runner, will do. CBR+PNK, because it's sort of, I think, was it Forged in the Dark? Yeah. It's really meant to be like, hey, you're about to start your run, go. Blade Runner feels like it's very much like an investigative game set in this very specific setting, and you'd have to really wrestle with it, I think, to expand on that. Cyberpunk Red, I feel like, gives you the tool set to go wild in a cyberpunk setting. Call of Cthulhu, even if you don't love the rules, the setting and the ideas of the stories have always... I'm going to choose Call of Cthulhu. Because it's got that, why can't I quit you? Like, why can't I quit you, Call of Cthulhu? The times I've played it, I've had a pretty good time, but not amazing. But I've always been so intrigued by, but what's going on? Like I said earlier, I love, almost compulsively, I want to know what's going on. So I got to give it to Call of Cthulhu. And I don't like it because Cyberpunk Red is such a good baseline toolkit for a genre that I love. I love that cyberpunk styling. And I feel like, could you just run the Blade Runner setting in Cyberpunk Red? Yes. I mean, that's the thing, right? Yes. Basically, yes. And then you could sort of explore a lot of the ideas you might want to explore in the Blade Runner setting that playing an actual Blade Runner might not give you access to. So, ugh. All right, we've got Hostile versus Conspiracist. I'm going to just make this really quickly. Hostile is by Zozer Games. I'm playing the Hostile solo version of it. Got 8 or 9 sessions up on the channel. That's my current go-to solo game. That's what I was going to try and run tonight before. Basically, our upstairs bathroom is leaking. Water's coming down to the ceiling. We're going to have our whole ceiling ripped out. A lot going on. So I was just like, can't fucking do it. I just can't do it right now. So The Conspiracist is by Playful Leviathan Press. It's got this sort of unique D4 system because it's a pyramid. It's all about conspiracies. It's actually kind of a light touch. Patrick ran me through Conspiracist. It's very much a like make shit up as you go along. At least that's how Patrick ran it. And it got me asking the question, like, just how many rules do you actually need to tell a role-playing story? Like, because I thought it did a great job with almost no rules whatsoever. And I thought it was great. I think we finished that one. Hostile is basically taking like Mongoose Traveler First Edition, which is sort of open license, which becomes like the Cepheus by Stella Gamma Games. And Cepheus is sort of like a 2D6 sci-fi engine. They've also adapted it to Sword and Sorcery. There's a whole, it's just a core engine you can sort of apply to everything. But if you basically like older school Traveler, that's what you're looking at with Cepheus and Hostile. Hostile basically creates a setting that's the alien universe, but if you want, you don't need to have the xenomorphs. They do include info there if you want to make it more horror-based. I've been really enjoying that vibe of the setting. That's basically my ideal sci-fi setting, like hardcore, hard sci-fi, space trucking, don't have too many aliens if you can help it. And it's just that kind of gritty, blue collar, are we getting overtime? I love that. Hostile captures that really well. The solo rules have been way more interesting than I was expecting. Not specifically for Hostile. Solo rules as a whole have been way more interesting than I expected. And Hostile is that as well. I've loved the story we've been telling about our little crew. And what Hostile's solo rules do that's different than most solo rules I've encountered is it lets you play the whole crew. And that was the magic that caught my eye. It's like, oh, I can have the whole crew of people talking about we're getting triple pay for danger. And it's really good. So yeah, I'm going to go with Hostile there. And I feel pretty good about that. Ker Nethalas, Delta Green. So here's Ker Nethalas is sort of like I played it solo and co-op. And it's basically like a really interesting dungeon crawl. It's by Black Oath. Black Oath Entertainment. Black Oath Entertainment. It's a D100 based system. Delta Green, you probably know. It's by Arc Dream Publishing. Also D100. Some people say maybe that's like a better Call of Cthulhu. It's got what I really like about Delta Green is the setting. You play Call of Cthulhu. We talked about this on our shows somewhere. Maybe when we're talking about like breaking up with systems, that was a damn fine coffee. Call of Cthulhu sometimes I feel struggles to give your characters reasons to do what they're doing. If you're playing a librarian, what the fuck are you doing, fighting something in Egypt? But like why are you running face first into certain death? And so when we played Scritch Scratch, and whenever I play a character in Call of Cthulhu, one of the things I specifically say is like, why am I going to do stuff that doesn't make sense? In Scritch Scratch is because I was the camera guy who wanted to impress the girl. And so when something came up that I would normally, as a character, be motivated to be like, I'm out. I needed to have a reason for me to say, no, I'm not out. I'm actually all in and I'm going to keep going. I don't know if Call of Cthulhu always sets you up that way. Delta Green gives you a little bit of better motivation for that because, again, you're sort of like a special agent charged with investigating this kind of stuff. The sanity progression, I think, is really well done, where you sort of break down and fall apart in a way that I think is very reminiscent of like a John le Carré novel. And when I was coming with my Mythras Imperative game for espionage, I was going to go with Delta Green. And the only reason why I did not go with Delta Green is because I couldn't change the skill list on the character sheet in Foundry VTT. Otherwise, it's a D100. It's got a lot of similarities to Mythras Imperative, and I could change the skill list. And I just didn't want to have a skill sheet where, hey, just ignore occult, right? Like just ignore this, because that was going to be too distracting, and I wanted to be able to sort of hone what I was doing behind the scenes to see how it worked. Ker Nethalas is a dungeon crawl, but it's a really fascinating one where you like randomize the layout, you randomize what you encounter room to room. It's just like a classic, like, hey, what's in the next room? Is that a locked door? Okay, what's behind that door? Oh, it's a treasure, but there's also 2 of these skeletons, and then you have a fight, and it's got this is tough because I really, really like Ker Nethalas. And they just came out with like the Graveyard edition. They sort of revised it and it was, I think, going to smooth out certain things, because the times that I played it, I think we ran into, and part of the problem was I was playing it wrong. And, luckily, Doc from our Discord and Alcoholics Adventure Cabal, when we were playing it together, he pointed out like, hey, dipshit, this is, I think you missed something here. That made it go a little bit smoother. The combat's a little grindy, and I don't know the Graveyard edition at all. So I don't know if that's some of the things that smoothed out. But what ended up happening was that the combat, which happens a lot, got very much like, okay, next round, same thing. Next round, same thing. And so if there was a way for that to be sped up while not losing the overall intent, that would be great. And then you're back to finding out what's in the next room. It took a little bit too long. And Delta Green, while I have not played it, I feel bad picking it, but I'm going to. The setting is exactly like that sort of X-File-y Cthulhu, what's going on here, investigation, combined with really good sanity mechanics. Yeah. And just I thought we started looking at one of the adventures that it's got some adventures that are just supposed to be straight up bangers. Ker Nethalas is just a really fun game. I think I would pick up like, hey, I've got a couple days to myself. Weather's not great. Yeah, let me just tinker around. Let me just run through a dungeon. Delta Green, I could see being something I could deep dive into for a long, long time. All right, going back to the other side. Pathfinder 2e versus Midnight Melodies. This also is a heartbreaker because I am going to choose Pathfinder 2e, and I hate myself for it. Pathfinder 2e, of course, is by Paizo. Midnight Melodies is by Cesar Capasle. I'm so sorry. I know I'm killing your name. I killed it when we played it. Midnight Melodies is like this D6 rules light system. Pathfinder 2e is a D20 classic armor class kind of hit points levels fantasy game. Midnight Melodies might be one of the coolest little games I've ever encountered. The style of it is so good. Part of the mechanics are the way you sort of measure progress through the story is by building up a chord, like a jazz chord. Does it matter how you track it? Technically, no, but that is the most, it's so evocative. So evocative. The random tables, it's basically like it's like a jazz investigation horror kind of game. And I think we did ours in Kansas City because, Matt's familiar with that area. And it's very much Cthulhu meets smoky jazz clubs. And we had a really good story. The random tables really inspired us to, I think it's meant to be like a solo kind of journaling game, but I thought it worked amazingly well. Like me keeping the Oracle inspirations private and then using that to build a narrative, Matt figuring it out. But either way, I think it would work amazingly well. It's just that it ran into Pathfinder in the first round. Again, Midnight Melodies would beat Conspiracist, probably Rune, Into the Odd, Eat the Reich, Space Train Heist, Long Dark Space Between the Stars, Black Ice, probably Rosewood Abbey, if I'm being honest, and maybe Ker Nethalas. Like, it's just that it ran into Pathfinder, which I think is one of the better, but not the best D20 fantasy system out there. That just is so mechanically deep and potentially interesting. It's really a game for people who want to get up to their elbows in mechanics and play the game. And yeah, and I think it's a nice refinement. It does D&D, I think, better than D&D. It's more complicated, but I don't mind that. So yeah, I'm going to go with Pathfinder. Don't feel good about it. Back to the other side. We've got Dragonbane versus Deus Vult, and this is another god damn it. Now, Deus Vult, the original is by Mongoose Publishing. Dragonbane is by Free League. Deus Vult technically is more of a setting-ish adaptation than a full rule set. So if you buy the Deus Vult books, I think you need to get, you need to get the rule book for their version of Mythras, which is, I forget what it's called. I'm looking it up real quick, and I apologize. I should have known what this is. Legend. I think it's an offshoot of like some version of RuneQuest. They lost the rights to it, so then they make Legend. I think Mythras basically starts much the same way. If you don't have Legend, you can get it for like $1. It's super cheap. The PDF. You can just play with Mythras. Like, you don't need Legend. Mythras and Legend, there's enough overlap that they're almost interchangeable sometimes. Yeah, so that's a D100. The setting, though, is incredibly cool. The setting is amazingly cool. It's basically Call of Cthulhu meets Rosewood Abbey. It's basically the Middle Ages, Dark Ages. You play monks. It's a little bit of like Mission Impossible, where you can be like super monks, but you can sort of dial that back if you want it to be a little more gritty. And you're investigating the occult, the evils in the world. When I got back into role-playing as an adult, I was inspired by the game Darklands. I was like, I want to run Darklands as a tabletop RPG, which is basically a computer role-playing game from the early 90s where the myths of medieval Europe, religion and folklore are true. So like heretics are actually a bad thing because the devils they worship are actually more real, things like that. And I thought it was just the coolest thing. The idea that you were like a secret organization operating out of Mont Saint-Michel in Normandy, France. Just again, like all these really cool ideas that came together beautifully. When I ran it a second time, I was like, I'm bringing this over to Savage Worlds. I ditched the D100 backbone from Legend / Mythras. And I thought Savage Worlds, because it's, again, you're part of a secret organization that, has like a little bit of special gadgets. It's not just like a gritty, ultra realistic RPG. And I felt like Savage Worlds really paired with that nicely. Dragonbane, I said a moment ago, Pathfinder is one of the better, but not the best D20 fantasy games I've played. Dragonbane is the best D20 fantasy game that I've played. It's because it's D100 derivative. It ditches armor class. It ditches a lot of the trappings of the D&D-esque D20 systems that I don't necessarily love. I don't know if Dragonbane has, again, the hooks to carry a super duper long-term campaign, although there are some published for it, so it must be able to do it all right. But it's got a lot going for it that I really like, because it takes like the D100 systems of yore and streamlines them in ways that I think make a lot of sense. And it makes for just a really great, fast, easy to pick up, but still complicated enough that you feel like you have choices. And it's interesting. It's a little more tactical than you would expect when you throw in the advanced rules, optional rules, which honestly don't add that much, so you might as well. It's just a really, really smooth system that is basically the best D20 fantasy game I've played. So as much as Deus Vult is the reason why I'm back into RPGs as an adult, and as much as I love that setting, I've got to give it to Dragonbane. So, okay, we're back over on the other side. Score versus Liminal Horror. Score is by, I'm going to choose Liminal Horror real quick just to get it out of the way, but then I'll get into why. Score is by Gila RPGs. It's the other RPG on this list from Gila Games, the other one being Rune. Liminal Horror is by Goblin Archives. Liminal Horror is an Into the Odd hack. Score, I think, is another Forged in the Dark. Yeah. Score is basically like a heist. It's like you're doing the robbery from Heat in a one-shot RPG. When Matt ran it, it was a clever thing. He mixed it with horror. Like we were basically breaking into a haunted mansion. Amazingly good time. We had a great run with Score, but it is, and this is not a bad thing. It does exactly what it sets out to do. But Liminal Horror, I think, could be a rules light backbone to just the X-Files or little Twin Peaks, right? And I think that is amazing. Liminal Horror, and I think I said this in our play, is the first time the Into the Odd rule set clicked. Usually I'm like, oh yeah, that's a rule set. Well, okay, that's cool. All right, whatever. I think Borg, is that kind of bounced off of that. Whatever Into the Odds I played, I bounced off a little bit until Liminal Horror. Because then the conceits that Into the Odd make, in my mind, helped it get out of the way for what I was looking to do, where like in Into the Odd, it's getting out of the way of stuff where, no, actually, I wanted to be in the way there. That might be some of the stuff I find interesting. In Liminal Horror, it really clicked for me. It was so good. And the stories are the kind of like Cthulhu investigation stories that I love. And Score is an amazing one shot. It's Forged in the Dark, which again, I feel like is just that sort of Swiss Army knife of rules light, where you're just like, you can sort of shape anything to that structure and you can get like a solid one shot out of it. It makes it easier. Like, you know what you're getting when you go into it. So like, which is important for a one shot because you don't actually want to learn the rules, right? You want to have enough baseline to just get going. So Score is really, really good, but Liminal Horror, I just think, has this potential that makes me want to go back to it. And I could play that one for a really long time. So, all right. Now, our last of the first round, I think the next rounds are going to go a little quicker. Entity versus English Eerie. I'm going to go with English Eerie. Entity is by Candleknot Games. English Eerie is by Trollish Delver Games. They're both like super rules light. English Eerie, it's the rules involve like tracking tokens, flipping cards over. So it's not like you could say like it's a forge. It's not. Entity is also like its own system where you're basically, I think you're like, it was one of the earliest things I did solo to like cover space when we couldn't get the gang together. And I didn't play through it the whole way because it's basically a story that can be spoiled. It's basically you sort of progress down like a story track to find out what's going on this sort of sci-fi planet that you're investigating. And it's very procedural. It's very resource management, more than I would say like character RPG. It's very good. And I could see it lasting you, say, like a weekend. It's meant to be a solo journaling game. You basically roll, figure out a location, get some details about the location, figure out like what that location cost you in terms of resources, put together a little paragraph of a story, keep going, and you sort of work your way down to what the bigger picture is. So it's something I don't know you could do more than once, but I feel like that once that you did it would be a really fun, fascinating, again, like it's a long winter, snowstorm. Hey, just spend a couple afternoons at the table, sort of going through the world of Entity once. You will not be disappointed. It's really fun. I really enjoyed it. I stopped on the channel because I didn't want to spoil the story. Once I realized like, oh yeah, no, if I give away the story, there's no reason for people to go play this. English Eerie, we've run a couple of different times. We run it as like it's meant to be, again, a solo journaling thing, but we've run it, I think, cooperatively. Me and Matt, we've run it with a GM and a player. I think Matt was the GM. I was the player. We've run it as a group co-op. Patrick and Matt, I think we're playing the same character in the adventure. So a lot of flexibility in that sense. It's sort of, again, investigating like a sort of Hounds of the Baskervilles kind of, sort of a Hounds of the Baskervilles. I don't know why I get those beeps. Hounds of the Baskervilles style, where you go to like a remote English village and there's just a dense fog on the moors and creepy shit is happening, and go figure it out. And it captures that vibe perfectly. And the mechanics of flipping the cards and running into obstacles, again, it keeps it moving. Yeah, really great time. That it had way more staying power than I expected. Like, I would also, like, spooky season, we need a 1 or 2 shot. I'd pick that one up again in a heartbeat. Or Midnight Melodies would be another one. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, if we need a 1 or 2 shot, like Liminal Horror, like I might not go to, because that might flesh out into like a 5-6 part adventure, and it can handle that. English Eerie is very much be like, hey, we can get this done in an evening if we focus up a little bit. A couple hours, boom, boom, boom. And the stories that came from it, I thought really worked out well. And now part of is that's us sort of riffing on the mechanics that they give you. But I feel like the stories where we riff on the fly for English Eerie and Midnight Melodies came together much, much better than the story we riffed for Rosewood Abbey and Space Train Heist maybe is another one. Long Dark Space Between the Stars, I think, came together pretty well. All right, so there we go. We got our first round done. So now we're just going to go back. Okay, so now we got Mythras Imperative versus Reich. I've already gone into both of these. That's going to be an easy one. Mythras Imperative is going to take that second round. Reich, I think, is potentially a good time. I'm still not 100% grabbed by the idea of it, but I liked it more than I thought I would. I expected to hate it. Mythras Imperative, I just feel like, is a great free D100 core rule set. Go. Oh, okay. Cyberpunk versus Vaesen. I am going to choose Vaesen. But that's a very, very close choice. Very close. Like, Mythras Imperative was kind of a clear choice. This, I had to stop and think about for a second. Vaesen, I think, just provides the bigger world and that sort of investigative that is what I really, really love in my RPGs. Cyberpunk, I think, CBR+PNK, I should say, is an amazing game for, like, let's do that run. And I think you could do it in a couple sessions. Sorry about that. Let me take a sip of water. Voice is immediately starting to go. But yeah, but against Vaesen, I have to go with that sort of big investigation mystery kind of game. All right, now we've got M-Space versus Harnmaster. That's going to be, again, not a choice I like, but it's going to be Harnmaster just because Harnmaster, all the reason, it's just, there's so much to it, and it makes me want to dive into that world. M-Space is good sci-fi, but again, I switched it over to Savage Worlds and kind of liked it better. And I ditched half the setting for my own take. So in the end, like, as much as I was running M-Space, I wasn't really running M-Space. So I'm going to go with Harnmaster. Over here, One Ring versus Sword of Serpentine. Got to go with the One Ring 2nd edition. The solo adventures I've run with that have been so good. I was highly skeptical of it when I first busted it open, but I found that it does, I'm a MERP guy, Middle Earth role-playing from way back, from Iron Crown Enterprises, looking at it right now. I felt like that game has my heart, but starting playing One Ring, I started to sort of internalize how it worked, the journeys, the this and that, and I started to realize this is a really good capture of Lord of the Rings. And at least on the solo front, I've had a really good time. I think I've run 2 sort of stories with it, and I've really enjoyed how it played out, how the mechanics worked, even though they're maybe not my favorite mechanics. I think it does a good job and really captures Middle Earth, which is a big part of this channel. If you've seen Lord of the Rings online playthroughs. Anyway, Savage Worlds versus Hostile. Gonna go with Savage Worlds. Man, I'm starting to think. Savage Worlds, like I said, might be the best generic system I've played. And yeah, Hostile has been really, really good. But I don't know if I would choose Hostile to run as a science fiction game for the group. Like if it was my turn in the rotation, what really captured my eye with Hostile was the solo with the crew. And so it's sort of a very specific niche for me in particular that checks a lot of boxes, but I understand that that's very much me in particular. So Savage Worlds is going to take that. Back over here, Call of Cthulhu versus Delta Green. I'm going to have to go with Delta Green. Obviously, they have a lot of overlap. I think Delta Green solves a lot of problems that I have with Call of Cthulhu while basically covering a lot of the same ground. And again, that sanity, the way sanity falls apart in Delta Green is, mwah, I really like it. So it's got to be Delta Green. Pathfinder 2E versus Liminal Horror. Matt's going to kill me. I'm going to choose Liminal Horror, and here's why. I don't need a lot of D20 fantasy in my life. Like it doesn't do a lot for me. Like Symbaroum, I find a more interesting setting. I guess that's also D20 in a way. It's different though. Dragonbane, I think, is a better D20 system for my taste. And Liminal Horror, and the setting of Pathfinder is sort of like a kitchen sink, right? Like, what do you want your fantasy world to be? Do you want it to be like ninja cats on an island over here? Do you want it to be frog people? Do you want it to, like that setting, those tropes don't speak to me basically at all. So the fact that it does the D20 fantasy really, really well is just not what I'm looking for most of the time. And Liminal Horror, I would play, I would never probably run Pathfinder. But Liminal Horror just is pressing the buttons that I like pressed in RPGs: investigation, horror, X-Filesy, Twin Peaksy, just so much going on. I've got to go with Liminal Horror, which when I was looking at it, I was about to click Pathfinder and say, obviously it's Pathfinder, but obviously it's not. So last matchup, Dragonbane versus English Eerie. Going to give it to Dragonbane. Dragonbane, yeah, it's the best D20 fantasy game. If I'm going to have one of those on my shelf, it's Dragonbane. English Eerie might be of sort of the one-shot story games in this bracket. I think English Eerie is my favorite. But, eventually like Cinderella runs slam into a behemoth. And for me, that behemoth is Dragonbane. All right, so now, next round, Mythras Imperative versus Harnmaster. Going to go with Harnmaster. They're very, very, very similar. D100 fantasy, blah, blah, blah. Harnmaster has some unique... Mythras has some mechanics that make more logical sense. Like if you're rolling an opposed roll, you have to try and get under a number on a D100 roll. A lot of systems give ties to the one that rolls lower. I prefer giving ties to the one that rolls higher. And it seems like a small thing, but it means that the person who has the better skill has a better chance of breaking the tie. You know what I mean? And I think there's logic to that, where rolling low is just rolling low. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter if you have a 90 skill or a 60 skill. If you roll a 2, you roll a 2. But that does matter if you go the other way when breaking it. So there's a lot of really nice touches to Mythras that I think make logical sense to me, which is why it caught my eye when I first read it. Harnmaster, though, again, it's just the world. It's D100. It's got sort of really interesting combat mechanics that if you, again, have the help of a VTT, move very quickly while still being interesting and not just typical, like you hit three points of damage. Yeah. So Vaesen versus the One Ring 2nd edition. This is tough. Do I want the game that would allow me to roleplay Middle Earth, which I love the idea of, or do I? It's got to be One Ring. The reason why, Vaesen, as much as I love the setting, the investigation, the this and that, the idea that like the Vaesen themselves is not. I like the idea of like the unknown Call Cthulhu nightmares instead of Vaesen's monsters that have like sort of a like the one trick they don't want you to know about. But everything about Vaesen, I genuinely, but the idea of just being like, I want to roleplay Middle Earth, and I feel like the One Ring will let me do it. I feel like that potential is too hard to ignore. So, Savage. Okay, the next one. Savage Worlds versus Liminal Horror to determine who's going to go into the semifinals. This is tough. This is tough. The question that I've never put to the test, but I've wanted to as I look over at some of my games. Could you run a liminal horror style investigation game with the Savage Worlds rules? In my heart, if you start pulling out Realms of Cthulhu, if you start pulling out the Deadlands Noir Companion, if you start pulling out, or Deadlands Noir, I feel like you could. But do you need to when you have liminal horror right there? Savage Worlds allows me to also play my hard sci-fi setting. It allows me to play Deus Vult. These are things that are not lost on me. Do they all end up feeling the same? It didn't necessarily feel the same to me. I don't know if it felt the same to some of my players that overlapped. Ooh, this is really hard, but liminal horror is sort of like, of all the like creepy investigation kind of games, liminal horror might be the most like the best one for me on this list, even above like Call Cthulhu, Delta Green. Because Delta Green, you play like an agent. So on some level, you have more agency than the nice thing about Call of Cthulhu is you don't have a ton of agency, but on some level, that doesn't give you a reason to proceed. Liminal horror, I feel like, at least the adventure we played in, like it happens to you and you can't just run away. But go long term, I just don't know. Spending a lot of time on this because part of me wants to give it to liminal horror and part of me wants to give it to Savage Worlds because with that toolkit, I feel like I could do just about anything. And it's allowed me to, it's basically what's going to allow me to run Deus Vult, which is, it's not going to allow me, like, it's the way I would choose to run a lot of different games exactly the way I want to run them without sacrificing too much. And I don't think I would ever feel like I'm sacrificing. Whew. Can't believe I'm going to do this. And give it to Liminal Horror. And I'm going to give it to Liminal Horror just because it captures that exact thing that I love about RPGs so perfectly. At least in the times that I played it. Savage Worlds is that Swiss Army knife that I can always go to reliably, but it's not doing the inspiration. Like playing Deus Vult was the inspiration. I just wanted a sort of a rule set that worked a little differently. And I was like, oh, Savage Worlds. Yeah, it's always good. It's always got your back. It's always going to help you move just for a pizza and beer, right? Like it's always got you. But Okay, and then the last quarterfinal going to the semifinal, Delta Green versus Dragonbane. God damn it. So Dragonbane, again, like the perfect D20 fantasy game for me. I love it. Delta Green, though, is another one of these games that's going after I need to know what happens in the story brainworm perfectly. but I haven't played it. Maybe it falls apart. I like that it's D100. Dragonbane is almost D100. This is tough. I haven't played it. I got to give it to Dragonbane. Got to give it to Dragonbane. I don't know if I feel good about that, but I've got to give it to Dragonbane just because Delta Green, I feel like by making you play an agent, I'm curious how that's going to play out in the long run. I will say that. Okay. Okay, so now we get to the semifinals to see who's going to play for first place. We've got Harnmaster versus Liminal Horror on one side, the One Ring versus Dragonbane on the other. A lot of representation on that side from Freely. Congratulations. Liminal Horror versus Harnmaster. God. I mean, it's supposed to be brutal, right? Like, if this was easy, then I probably screwed up the brackets. But everything I said about Liminal Horror being like exactly what I'm looking for in that I need to know what happens in the story versus Harnmaster, which is just, if I had the right setup for a group, Harnmaster could be the type of game I played for years. Liminal Horror would be like, hey, it's your turn in the rotation. Yeah, oh, let's do that for 6 or 7 sessions. And then, yeah. But Harnmaster's world is so deep. The rules are a little clunky, but again, with the VTT, I found it worked pretty well. I like the lore. I like all the story possibilities. The hooks. I think I'm going to choose Harnmaster. And then for the other side, the One Ring versus Dragonbane. I'm going to go the One Ring. I prefer the system in Dragonbane in a lot of ways. But the One Ring, again, like, can you roleplay all of Middle Earth? There's a lot of supporting material that's pretty well done, not nearly to the degree that the old Middle Earth role-playing game supplements were, but if you happen to have those, then you have them and you can incorporate that. Because I feel like the One Ring does a good job with a lot of other aspects of Middle Earth, like, again, like the traveling and the corruption. And so while a lot of it is not maybe the best, I feel like it does do what it's trying to accomplish. And what it's trying to accomplish is something that, for me personally, is something I really enjoy. Again, Lord of the Rings Online. Been playing that since it released in 2007. It's a long ass time, right? And I still play it. I still enjoy it. The idea of just being in Middle Earth is captivating enough to me that, that I have to pick it over Dragonbane, which, again, mechanically, like, I almost, if there were like, take the mechanics of Dragonbane and put them into the One Ring, like, I'd be just as happy with that in a more traditional fantasy sense. But yeah. Okay, so that leaves us with vying for the championship, Harnmaster, the One Ring. And then for the third place game, we've got Liminal Horror versus Dragonbane. Start with the third place game, Liminal Horror versus Dragonbane. Do I reward a system over setting or a setting and the story over system? And I think when I put it that way, it's not a hard choice. It's not a hard choice because at the end of the day, as much as people like to say system matters, for me, would choose story and setting every time. Not that system doesn't matter, but for me, the thing that's always going to grab my attention are the stories and the setting. And that's why, like, Symbaroum, where did Symbaroum go? Symbaroum had a rough first round draft in the seeding. So I don't know if the mechanics of Symbaroum are amazing. I don't think they're maybe, I don't know if they're anything to write home, but I have no idea. Like as time goes by, hopefully we get back to it. I'll be able to maybe weigh in a little bit more, but I can tell you the setting and the story were blowing me away. And I would come back for that every single time. Sort of the Serpentine. I don't know if I like Gumshoe. I'm really skeptical for some reason, even though I've never played it. So it might not be well founded, but I'm skeptical. And that setting though, got me very excited. Matt, I think, was the same way. Like we were both like, oh my God, this setting, like, holy cow. So I think for who I am, I've got to choose story and setting over mechanics. And that's going to mean Liminal Horror takes over Dragonbane for the third place. Now, for the title, Harnmaster versus the One Ring Second Edition. I don't know if this is where I expect it to be in the finals. I don't know what I expected. I didn't really have much expectations because I was only seeing the brackets for the first time when I started this. But Harnmaster versus the One Ring. So basically everything I'm just saying, story, setting, they both have amazing settings that I think would create amazing stories. They both have mechanics that get the job done. I prefer the D100 systems of Harnmaster to the mechanics of One Ring, which are more bespoke. Harnmaster has some really great random tables for like random encounters as you travel the world. It's got a nice weather system that I've actually pulled into other games. I don't know if I might have even pulled it into the One Ring. I can't remember. The One Ring also has a setting that inspires multiple stories. It is a little more, I will say this though. The One Ring, and I said this in my playthroughs, it's a little intimidating because I feel like I don't know Middle Earth and I feel like I should in order to do the stories justice. Even though I know the rulebook says, don't worry about it. Just roll with it. We get that. Just roll with it. Don't worry about it. There's a lot to Middle Earth that I really like. The idea that, the magic and the world are connected so that as the world suffers, other forces suffer. Like as nature suffers, I like that idea of the setting. It's relatively low magic. I don't like the patron system of the One Ring, and it's something I basically have tried to work around. I feel like I've made it work enough, but like having Gandalf as my patron feels incredibly wrong. Harnmaster has a setting in a world that is unique to the game, but I don't feel bad not knowing it super well. Like I feel like I'm more comfortable making that my own. I do like the D100 mechanics, but they do get a little overdone if you aren't having a little bit of VTT help. The hardest part is character creation. Like that's a bit of a bear. There are other things where like, if you layer armor, you have to pre-calculate stuff. But if you got it pre-calculated, then it's not such a big deal. But it is cumbersome. And the other thing about Harnmaster is, and this is something that came up the time I ran it. I was so excited to run it. And then it almost immediately fell apart because I don't think I established clearly and got some feedback on this in the session 0, like, hey, it's going to be this kind of game. So when people used the random tables and ended up rolling up a somewhat ineffective out in the road cook, I was like, oh shit, like why is a cook traveling? And then once we got out there, it's like, what is the cook actually doing? And one of my players actually said, like, I'm not sure why my character is doing any of this. And so I think for all of the options it gives you, it might be a little too broad, so that I think you need to go into it. It's not for the inexperienced group or GM. I think you need to go into it being like, hey, what kind of game do you want to run? And then once you do that, build those characters. I don't think you can just say, hey, we're going to play Harnmaster, roll up characters. Oh, I've got a story to tell you. The reason why I didn't tell them is I was trying to see if we could pull off some surprises. But what one of my players actually said at the time is like, I don't need to go to Harn to go out onto the road adventuring and exploring caves. And like, I can do that with any fantasy RPG. I loved personally doing it in Harnmaster and I thought it did it better, but I got what he was saying. So, and I think by letting the players just roll up random shit, I think it ended up hurting the experience. I could see the same problem with a game like Warhammer Fantasy. Zweihander, that was an issue I thought I ran into where my character, like I rolled up, I was trying to I felt like, why is my character doing some of this stuff? And I can't do any of this well. And anyway, yeah. So now the reason why I'm going in all negatives is because I've been praising all the positives of these games the whole time. I think this is tough. I'm going to choose the One Ring. The reason why I'm going to choose the One Ring is because, again, like Harnmaster, the world and the setting really intrigue me. But there's sort of something magical about Middle Earth. And the One Ring, I think, captures that. I think it captures it in some ways. I don't know if this is sacrilegious. It captures it better in some ways than the old Middle Earth role-playing game, which could be quite magic heavy. It does trip over certain things. Like, I don't like the patron. I don't know why it's there, but I feel like, could you make that patron anybody with a little hacking and then use adventures from Middle Earth role-playing? Could you? The trick, though, I will say with the One Ring is that it expects you to be a good person, a good character. I don't remember if the old Middle Earth role-playing, could you play like a scuzzy thief in Tharbad? There's a Thieves of Tharbad module, but like, could you be sort of more morally neutral or evil? Not that that's the most important thing, but again, because the One Ring, like, again, it's trying to capture Lord of the Rings, maybe less so than Middle Earth. And in Lord of the Rings, you're a good character trying to save the world. And I think you can get into a lot of interesting things from that. And I don't feel like you lose too much by being forced into certain holes, certain buckets, or whatever you want to say. So there we go. This was our Black Lodge Trivia Night March Madness brackets. And the One Ring comes out on top, defeating Harnmaster. Third place goes to Liminal Horror. Fourth place, Dragonbane. So going into it, when I was filling this out, here's what I expected to have more success. I expected the final four maybe to be Savage Worlds, Dragonbane, which made it. The One Ring, I don't know if I would have expected that to get as far as it did. Harnmaster, I could see it being in the final four just because of my personal love of it. Ones that I thought would have gotten further than they did just had bad luck. Blade Runner. I thought Blade Runner would knock a few out. Cyberpunk Red, I thought would knock a few out. Deus Vult, I expected to go much deeper. I could have seen Deus Vult being in the final four. But yeah. Anyway, there we go. I hope this was fun, a little bit something different. Hopefully we'll get Matt and Patrick and back, get the whole crew back going into the Pathfinder Seasons of Ghost rotation. It's one of those things where we are like, oh man, we are ready to go. Yeah. And then, oh shit, did any of us look at our calendars? Oh God, I think we spoke too soon. So hopefully we'll, like, in the last one, like Patrick was on the road, just stuff immediately came up. So hopefully things settle down pretty soon. You don't have to deal with me too much. We'll get back to some Pathfinder because I'm really looking forward to it. And there we go. So this has been Black Lodge Trivia Night. Thank you very much for checking this out. If you're watching, you found our YouTube channel, like, subscribe, click the notification bell. To all the people who have subscribed, thank you very much. We really appreciate all of you. If you prefer audio versions of this, just search for Black Lodge Trivia Night where we get your podcasts. We should show up. We have a Discord if you want to jump in, talk about RPGs, computer role-playing games, all that kind of stuff. Trying to organize some games on there every once in a while, something very, informal, casual, et cetera, et cetera. Otherwise, yeah, we appreciate everybody who checks this stuff out, and we will be back again soon. Thanks again. Take care.